The Vikings did not all look the same, and their blood remembers secrets their sagas never told. For centuries, the Viking story was carved in stone. Tall, pale, fierce, born of the frozen north. That image survived wars, museums, and movies. It felt complete, comforting, finished. But bones do not lie, and DNA does not care about legend. When scientists began reading the genetic code left behind in Viking graves, something unexpected surfaced. Not a single truth, but fractures, contradictions, quiet evidence of movement, mixing, and change. Who were the Vikings really? Where did they come from? And who did they become? The answers did not arrive all at once. They crept in, sample by sample, grave by grave. And each one made the old story harder to hold on to. It started with teeth and bone fragments no longer held together by flesh or name. Scientists extracted DNA from people buried as warriors, travelers, farmers, and outsiders. Some graves were rich with weapons. Others were silent and plain. At first, the results felt familiar. Yes, many carried traits common to Northern Europe. But then, the patterns broke. Some Vikings had genetic markers tied to the south. Others carried ancestry from the east. A few showed clear links to places far beyond Scandinavia. These were not visitors buried by accident. They lived as Vikings, died as Vikings, were buried by Viking hands. The sea, it turns out, did not just carry ships. It carried bloodlines. In one settlement, DNA revealed families that looked nothing alike by modern expectations. Dark hair beside light, different facial structures within the same household. Not strangers, relatives. The Viking world was not sealed. It was porous. Children grew up hearing the same stories, worshipping the same gods, learning the same fears. Even if their ancestors once spoke different tongues, then came another surprise. Some skeletons buried with swords were not genetically male, and some, buried without weapons, carried the DNA of seasoned warriors. The grave goods lied. The DNA did not. Status in Viking society, scientists realized, was not written into the body. It was earned, granted, or taken. And then there was disease. Traces of illnesses appeared in the genetic code. Marks of infections that traveled with ships and trade routes. The Vikings did not just spread culture and fear. They carried invisible passengers. Some survived, some did not. DNA also showed signs of adaptation. Genes linked to cold tolerance, to diet heavy in protein and fat, to surviving long winters with little mercy. These were not accidental traits. They were shaped by generations of pressure. But here is where the story turns darker. In some mass graves, scientists found people with mixed ancestry, buried violently, quickly, without honor. No careful placement, no ritual. The DNA suggested they were not all local. Some may have been taken, others followed. Not every Viking journey ended in glory. Some ended in erasure, and then came the most unsettling realization. The Viking identity was not genetic at all. There was no single Viking gene, no blood marker that separated them cleanly from the rest of Europe. Viking was not what you were born as. It was what you did, how you lived, who accepted you. The sword, the ship, the oath. These mattered more than ancestry, which means the Viking world could absorb people and discard them just as easily. That flexibility made them powerful and unstable. The more scientists read, the clearer it became. The Vikings were already changing, while the sagas were still being told. By the time the world noticed them fading, they had already rewritten themselves in silence. This discovery did not just rewrite Viking history. It unsettled something deeper. If the Vikings, symbols of rigid strength and identity, were this fluid, what does that say about the stories we cling to today? Their DNA showed cooperation where we imagined purity, movement where we imagined borders, adaptation where we imagined tradition. But it also showed cost. People absorbed into Viking life sometimes vanished from record entirely. Their names lost, their origins swallowed. The Viking world offered belonging, but it demanded surrender. To become one of them was to let the past blur. And when their era ended, the DNA did not disappear. It blended, quietly, living on in places that no longer remembered why. The Vikings believed memory lived in stories, in songs, in stones. But it turns out their truest record was hidden in blood, still speaking, still changing. And if their identity was never fixed to begin with, we are left with one question the DNA cannot answer. Did the Vikings vanish, or are they simply unrecognizable now?